The Soviet Union was known for its grandiose projects and ambitions, many of which left behind fascinating remnants that continue to captivate historians, explorers, and urban adventurers. These abandoned structures reveal tales of scientific pursuit, military dominance, and immense human effort, some of which met untimely ends due to political turmoil, economic struggles, or disasters. Here's a look at 16 creepy and mysterious abandoned places in the former USSR. Number 15, Hovrinskaya Hospital. The 11-story, unfinished Hovrinskaya Hospital in Moscow represents the unfulfilled promises of the Soviet healthcare system, with ambitions for a sizable medical facility with 1,300 beds. Construction on the hospital started in the 1980s. But after just 5 years, the building's development was stopped, and it was abandoned to decay in a partially finished form. Hovrinskaya Hospital is now regarded as one of Russia's most eerie deserted sites. Squatters, especially the homeless and drug addicts, quickly took up residence in the incomplete structure, causing several accidents in the neighborhood. The facility developed a reputation as a risky destination for thrill seekers over the years, which resulted in several unfortunate accidents. It was decided to destroy the building in 2018 following years of legal battles over its future. Hovrinskaya Hospital is a sobering reminder of the inefficiency of the Soviet period and the tragic demise of several grandiose ambitions that never materialized. Number 14, Crimean NPP. One of the most ambitious Soviet projects in the 1970s was the Crimean Nuclear Power Plant, which is situated in Crimea close to Chelkino. The facility was intended to serve as a testament to Soviet technological might and supply power to the whole Crimean Peninsula. The first reactor was scheduled to come online in 1989, with construction of the project having started in 1975. However, the project was abandoned as a result of the Chernobyl accident and the collapsing Soviet economy. One of the most costly nuclear power plant projects in history was the Crimean NPP. Over 500 million rubles had been spent by the time construction stopped, and there were still 250 million rubles worth of supplies and equipment in storage. Much of the equipment was seized after the fall of the Soviet Union, and the complex deteriorated for many years. The project, which is now a forgotten relic of the Soviet period and is listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most costly power plant of its kind, never achieved its goal despite the ambitious intentions. Number 13, Balaclava. One of the Soviet Union's most covert military sites was the Balaclava submarine facility, which is situated on the Crimean Peninsula. The facility was constructed during the Cold War with the intention of housing Soviet submarines in a nuclear-resistant subterranean structure. A water canal, dry docks, warehouses, and military facilities were all part of the site. The site was picked because it was strategically significant, and the submarines would naturally blend in with the rocks of Balaclava Bay. The base remained out of the public eye for over 50 years, until it was closed in 1994 after the final submarine was removed. Visitors may now experience a piece of Cold War history at the site, which opened to the public as a tourist destination in 2003. The Balaclava submarine facility is nevertheless a significant historical reminder of the Cold War era's tensions, and an amazing display of Soviet military expertise, despite years of widespread looting. Number 12, Object 221. Object 221, a covert underground bunker, is another piece of Soviet history located close to Sevastopol. Object 221 was constructed in 1977 with the intention of serving as the Black Sea Fleet's backup command post. The structure has 4 levels and 17,000 square meters of space overall. The 200-meter deep bunker was built to resist a nuclear attack and include a whole subterranean city with all the amenities its occupants would require. However, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the location was deserted and allowed to deteriorate. The facility is in a state of ruin because robbers have robbed the bunker of any precious materials throughout the years. Even with its deteriorating state, Object 221 is still an intriguing example of Cold War military architecture that provides insight into the covert nature of Soviet military planning. Number 11. Nuclear Lighthouse at Cape Anova. The unusual nuclear-powered lighthouse at Cape Anova is located on Sakhalin Island, off the coast of Russia. The lighthouse was constructed in the 1950s with the purpose of giving ships navigating assistance while they navigated the choppy waters of the Sea of Okhotsk. A lighthouse, which was fueled by a nuclear reactor to assure its continuous functioning, was both an architectural and technological wonder. With up to 12 workers stationed there at any given time, the lighthouse performed its duty for many years. However, the lighthouse was deserted and finally plundered following the fall of the Soviet Union. Its once crucial role has since been reduced to a shadow of its former self, and it now remains as a forgotten monument of the USSR's technical aspirations. Number 10. Dvina Missile System. One of the most important remains of the Soviet Union's military power is the Dvina missile system, which is situated close to Riga, the capital of Latvia. The complex, which was constructed in the 1960s, had a variety of bunkers and launch silos intended to hold Soviet intercontinental ballistic missiles. During the Cold War, the location served as a strategic deterrent, guaranteeing that the Soviet Union could use deadly force to counter any nuclear threat. The Dvina complex is not an exception to the widespread abandonment of such missile systems following the fall of the Soviet Union. Because of the poisonous rocket fuel residues that are still there, tourists are strongly prohibited from visiting the complex, and the launch shafts are currently inundated. The dreadful military prowess that was once a part of the Soviet arsenal is demonstrated by the Dvina missile system. Number 9. Workshop of the Dagdizel plant. The Dagdizel factory, a unique Soviet facility constructed to test naval weaponry, including torpedoes and missiles, was situated in the Dagestani city of Kaspiask. Built over a huge hole in the 1960s, the facility was intended to test weapons in a controlled setting. With a volume of more than 530,000 cubic meters, the hole was excavated using specialized military shells. To test naval technology, a huge metal structure that was 14 meters high was lowered into the hole. But by the middle of the 1960s, the facility had been abandoned due to shifting trends in weaponry design. The ruins of the Dagdizel workshop are now being left to rust and rot in the hostile marine environment as the Caspian Sea gradually consumes it. The facility is nonetheless an intriguing example of Soviet naval engineering and the military goals of the era, even with its demise. Number 8. Lapatinsky Phosphate Mine. One of the biggest and most distinctive phosphate rock formations in Europe is found in the Moscow area at the Lapatinsky Phosphate Mine. The mine became a vital supply of phosphorus for the Soviet fertilizer industry once mining activities started in the 1930s. Numerous cutting-edge excavating methods were used at the site, including as walking, rail, caterpillar, and bucket wheel excavators. However, the mine had been abandoned by the 1990s. The heavy gear was abandoned to rust in the open when the quarries were overrun by water. The Lapatinsky mine now stands as a somber reminder of the massive industrial endeavors that bolstered the Soviet economy but were eventually abandoned to the elements. Number 7. Station for the Study of the Ionosphere. During the Soviet period, the Station for the Study of the Ionosphere in Zimivo, Ukraine, was an important scientific establishment. The Soviet installation, which included a massive parabolic antenna with a diameter of 25 meters, was designed as a counterpart to the American HAARP project in Alaska. The ionosphere, a crucial component of radio transmission and weather patterns, was to be studied by the station. The station's costly scientific equipment was abandoned and allowed to decay following the fall of the Soviet Union. The once state-of-the-art scientific instruments were either left to deteriorate or taken by scavengers. The complex is now in ruins, its function long since forgotten, but its physical remains serve as a mute reminder of the Soviet Union's scientific ambitions. Number 6. Northern Crown. An ambitious project, the Northern Crown Hotel, formerly called Petrogradskaya, started in St. Petersburg in 1988. The hotel was supposed to be an opulent representation of Soviet economic and architectural success. However, a number of mishaps plagued the hotel's development, including Metropolitan John's death from a heart attack during the building's lighting ceremony. Despite the terrible mishaps, the hotel was still being built until the fall of the Soviet Union, at which point it was abandoned and left unfinished. The Northern Crown Hotel is a reminder of the grandiosity and eventual downfall of Soviet mega-projects. The building's dilapidated and unfinished form is a metaphor for the Soviet Union's own disintegration. Number 5. Particle Accelerator. In the late 1980s, a huge particle accelerator project was underway in the Moscow area, close to the town of Protvino. The project had the potential to make a substantial contribution to the scientific community, and was designed to compete with the top particle accelerators in the world. Much of the accelerator's equipment had already been brought in, and a 21-kilometer tunnel was built. But the project was put on hold when the Soviet Union fell apart. Due to a lack of finance following the fall of communism, the accelerator's development came to a complete stop. Once a representation of Soviet scientific aspirations, the tunnels are now deserted, and the building is gradually deteriorating. What once served as a hub for scientific progress now stands as an incomplete monument to unrealized promise. Number 4. Oil Rocks. Once a thriving marine metropolis, the oil rocks are located off the coast of the Caspian Marine in Azerbaijan. Geologists from the Soviet era discovered enormous oil riches beneath the sea, which gave rise to the city. The city rapidly expanded into a full-fledged metropolis with power plants, hospitals, and 9-story buildings all built on the water after oil extraction platforms were completed in the 1940s. However, the oil rocks declined in the 1970s and 1980s as inexpensive Siberian oil became more popular. Many of the platforms were abandoned, and the once thriving metropolis began to deteriorate. The city's ruins now serve as haunting, rusted reminders of the Soviet Union's oil ambitions and the eventual demise of its once ambitious initiatives. Number 3. Abandoned Missile Silo, Kakava, Latvia. One of the ruins of the Soviet Union's military presence in Eastern Europe is the defunct missile silo at Kakava, Latvia. During the Cold War, the complex, which included a central control bunker and 4 launch silos, was built to fire R-12U intercontinental ballistic missiles. Machine gunners patrolled the region around the clock, and the silo was closely guarded. But by the 1980s, the military had left the area, taking all of the expensive equipment with them. When looters arrived in the early 1990s, they took anything they could from the site. The deserted missile silos serve as eerie memories of the Cold War's tense, militaristic environment and the fall of Soviet control. Number 2. Over-the-horizon radar Duga, Pripyat, Ukraine. Situated close to Pripyat in Ukraine, the over-the-horizon radar Duga was a large Soviet radar system intended to identify impending intercontinental ballistic missile launches. The radar was one of the biggest buildings the Soviet Union had ever constructed, standing 150 meters tall and more than 800 meters long. However, because of its high power consumption, the radar system was discontinued after just a brief period of operation. For those who dare to come, the Duga radar, which now sits in ruins next to the defunct Chernobyl nuclear station, is a terrifying sight. The enormous building, a relic of the Cold War armaments competition that has since been allowed to decay, is still visible. Number 1. Semipalatinsk Nuclear Test Site, Kazakhstan, Semipalatinsk. The Soviet Union's first and biggest nuclear testing program was conducted at the Semipalatinsk Nuclear Test Site in Kazakhstan. At least 468 nuclear tests, including both atmospheric and subterranean explosions, were conducted at the location between 1949 and 1989. Although the facility was shut down in 1991 as the Soviet Union fell apart, the surrounding lands are still contaminated by radioactive fallout from the testing. Some people still reside in the neighborhood, and the radioactive background is still high despite the risks. The devastating potential of nuclear weapons and the costs incurred during the Cold War arms race are starkly brought home by the Semipalatinsk test site. These abandoned Soviet sites are more than decaying structures. They are reminders of human ambition, scientific achievement, and the perils of unchecked progress. While some have become tourist attractions, others remain hidden and dangerous, waiting to be rediscovered by the brave and curious. Each tells a story of a bygone era, offering a glimpse into the triumphs and failures of the Soviet Union.